As I think about, most software markets aren't necessarily a winner take all market from a market share or revenue perspective, but certainly a large portion of the value inures to the leader, right?
Mm-hmm.
Funding is relatively abundantly available for the right kind of founders and concepts and businesses that are coming up, right? In that pretext, is 30% EBITDA margin dream of any SaaS company really a dream or a mirage? Is there a secret to achieving that? Having seen so many businesses, do you have a formula that you feel like, hey, this is the right way to get there and sustain?
SaaS is in this world of incredibly strong margins. The only reason a SaaS business would have a lack of profitability is because they're very inefficient, or they don't have a product that people like, or they're just investing a lot in growth, right? And all of those things can be realities that good companies experience at some point in time. Then maybe they grow out of them, they fix them. Basically, it is kind of easy to have good margins in SaaS. Just had a really great conversation with a CFO recently who was talking about his growth and profitability framework. And it's something that I've spoken to multiple CFOs about and kind of had myself in the past. And I think it's really important to think about EBITDA margins in that lens. You need to have this concept of, you can get to 30% EBITDA margins if you want to, but you're probably going to kill growth to do it, in most, medium-sized, semi-mature businesses. And so I think it's almost maybe in my mind more of a fallacy of, is anyone actually going to get to the 30% EBITDA margin? I think they will as soon as they are willing to slow down the growth rate. It's just that growth is so worthwhile relative to margin that most companies, as soon as they get to cash flow break even, they say, let's reinvest. Like every dollar I put in, I'm getting $2 out or $3 out. So why would I just take the dollar out instead of getting $3 out in a year? SaaS is just such a good business that it leads to a lot of reinvestment. And it's definitely not the universal story, but I think that's a very common story. Zendesk, for instance, was growing at, let's say, 30 to 40% for many years while I was there annually. And we had a EBITDA margin, I want to say, well, non-GAAP anyways, was positive. If you include the equity compensation, right, that's a whole different story, but a whole other kind of debate to have. But their non-GAAP margin was positive by, I want to say, 5%, like nominally positive, and cash flow margin was materially positive. And so, if they wanted to, they probably could have just slowed down growth, and they could have gotten to a 30% EBITDA margin and even a GAAP profitability of some level with a significant cash flow margin. But would that really have been the right thing for the business? I think investors would have said, I'm out, you would have gotten a decent valuation on the cash flow. And that's like a nice business that will last for a while. But as soon as you stop investing in R&D, you stop investing in S&M, you're going to end up with slower growth and then increasingly slower growth over time as your product falls behind. And so that just is a much less compelling decision for folks to make, especially when they have the pressure of being public. That gives me the reason to bring up one other, pet peeve, I guess I might say, of mine, which is the notion of, being beholden to investors. And there's no easy solve for this, but it is just so sad to see how many businesses make decisions based on what their investors or what their board members are going to kind of demand from them versus taking the 4 to 5 year out view of it. And I think in many cases, going for profitability over growth, in my opinion, and of course it varies by circumstance a lot, would be something that you're going to get investors pushing for in certain circumstances. That might not be the right thing for the business. It's the classic Jeff Bezos quote, I believe. I think a number of famous business leaders have said this type of thing, but I'm baking the quarter 3 years from now. People congratulate me on the quarter I just had, and I tell them like, cool, I made that quarter like 3 years ago. So I'm thinking about 3 years from now. Those are my thoughts, but also recognize that profitability has to be attained at some point, right? And so I do wonder what the future holds for a lot of these SaaS businesses, and if many of them will eventually start to make that pivot away from growth towards profitability.
Yeah, because as I think about it, as a technology business, you need to invest in R&D, right? As soon as you stop investing, you are going to fall behind the up-and-coming competitor who's looking to snatch up that market share from you, right? With doing something different, something unique. And there is always a new paradigm that is coming in, whether it's mobile, whether it's, like this cloud, mobile, and then now sort of AI. So you need to continue to invest. And it seems like, there's always day one, right, for something that you want to put money into. But interesting conversation. And I think from a capital allocation perspective, it's an interesting problem for finance folks to solve as well.
I feel it's one of the most interesting challenges for finance folks these days to think about developer productivity and the ROI of investment in development of certain areas of software. Inevitably, it's the question a CFO asks, the CEO asks, and in some cases, even the heads of product engineering are asking. How do we make sure that our folks are being high ROI, that they're working hard, that they're productive, and then how do we know that we're investing in the right products that are going to get us the ROI that we want? And those are incredibly difficult questions to answer on the finance side. I think you can do some interesting surveying. You can look at the market and you can examine, just cases, scenarios of potential user, numbers, adoption numbers, and the revenue that can be associated with that to try to build scenarios. But it's something that I feel needs to be a partnership with a lot of the other organizations in the company. So just sharing an anecdote, I had a great partner at Zendesk that did a lot of market research and was also a product sort of business operations and strategy and pricing and packaging person. A very well-rounded individual. And so I was able to use, my finance experience and his, product and kind of market knowledge to help create these informed scenarios around what products might look like, adoption might look like, pricing and packaging might look like, and therefore ultimately revenue might look like. Compare that against the potential investment that could be put behind it in terms of people dollars, and come out with some sort of theoretical ROI. Were those numbers ever accurate? That's a very good question. The question I know the answer to. In many cases, it would take years for all of it to play out, and so we don't really have good actuals against the scenarios we made. But it's something that I feel needs to be further explored in the finance world to try to make those hard decisions.